What about the recent economic turmoil in Ireland? Is Irish likely to be a victim of? Well, I presume it must be a victim of various cuts and stuff. Will it still have has it got a high enough profile to get through the next few years? Do you think?
That's a hard thing. That was what I was saying about the general question about minority languages or interest in cultures or peripheral cultures. That a lot of the interest, I think, is to do with people's comfort area, in fact, that they're not, on the poverty line anymore, and so they're more interested in some things. And a lot of society sees them as fairly peripheral. You can argue certainly that they're not. They're to do with, expansion and investment in Irish is actually to do with building the economy, building the culture, and building people's self-respect in lots of ways, which drives a lot of other things too. There's been quite a lot written recently about the link between language and economic development, which I think is not spurious. There are some good links there too. But Irish, from its institutionalized perspective, depends on state money. There's certainly the teaching system, of course, the television, the radio. Subsidies to the national papers and so on to keep these things coming out. They rely on state money, and state money is drying up, and so it will be cut back, but it won't be cut back more than other things. I think. I don't think it's been dropped. It's just been cut back more. The idea that lots of money was being spent on it in the first place is something that you sometimes hear in political circles as well, that you shouldn't spend so much money in Irish, but actually very little money has been spent on Irish. If you look at the national budget, it's the national budget spent on Irish is about the same as fixing the roads around, a couple of kilometres around Dublin or something. It's not an enormous amount of money, and some of it is ring-fenced, but not a lot. Generally, the population, as I was saying, the population supports this, and the population wouldn't support huge cuts. The television station is not about to be taken off the air, or the radio to disappear, or it to be taken out of schools. Although, one of the political parties standing in elections at the moment wants to take it out of compulsory education anyway.
And maybe finally, what about Manx? Do you think Manx has from your perspective, studying, sometimes it's good to get an outsider's viewpoint, really, because we sort of live it, really, and it's very difficult to sort of stand back and have a sort of impartial view in many ways. Do you think Manx seems to have a viable or future in the Isle of Man? Well, whatever that means. I'm not quite sure what viable
that's always
future
the problem,
means.
Isn't it? I think Manx is like Irish in a microcosm in lots of ways. Many of the same issues we have about Irish regeneration or revitalisation are similar to Manx. There's always the question of the kind of Manx being spoken. We have the question about the kind of Irish being spoken. Is it fairly authentic? Is it strong enough to live on its own and to build itself, or is it constantly looking for support from somewhere, if you like? And if you reach this threshold of language growth, then it's okay, I think. And I think Manx probably is there. It's got a sufficient number of speakers who speak well enough for it to continue to, certainly to have a good life. Thriving is probably less so, but the dynamic is there, and it's been growing all the time for the last since whenever I started being interested in Manx, and it's people were interested in Manx long before I was too, and it's been growing back, and it's been filling lots of gaps which were there. It's gone well beyond trying to imitate the last of the traditional native speakers. It's moved in a really very impressive way. If you compare it to some of the other languages in Europe, which have gone through what we might call extreme language shift, I suppose. Manx is definitely up there and probably ahead of the posse by a long way, actually. And I think the Manx probably don't need an awful lot of help to look after themselves, but it's very impressive, I think, looking at the Manx situation from outside, really.
Well, we're too awkward to ask for help from anyone else anyway, but it's a good message to finish on, because I think it's a message we sometimes need to hear more often, really, and a bit more confidence about what we're doing. So, good on my